Hi pals, John with the LensPal here with Lighting 101, Episode 4, Settings. In today's episode, we're going to talk about camera and light settings and how you can use them to get the perfect exposure every single time. What I'm about to say is going to sound a little strange, but I need you to trust me and then go and test this out. On the screen right now is an image that shows the main subject, which has been frozen in time by the use of a strobe, while the background of the image is showing motion. One important setting to take into consideration when using flash photography is your camera's sync speed. Now, different manufacturers and even different models from the same manufacturer have varying sync speeds. Well, I've used that term a couple of times now, so let's actually describe what a sync speed is. It's the fastest shutter speed your camera can handle and correctly expose a strobed image. Different camera manufacturers and even different models from the same manufacturer have different maximum sync speeds. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is here, but you need to understand what your camera's is if you're going to use strobes. Now, a maximum sync speed is how fast your shutter speed can be and still correctly expose an image when working with strobes. On the screen now, we've got an example of when your sync speed is too fast. What happens is you get a dark area on the image. This is actually the rear curtain of your camera closing before the flash has had time to correctly expose that part of the sensor. As you can see, this is not a desirable effect, and it's something to be avoided, which is why knowing your camera's maximum sync speed is something you should find out. So that's camera settings. What about light settings? Depending on the type of light you have, the output might be displayed in either a percentage. This is more typical on constant light, such as the Aperture 300, or it might be displayed as a fraction, like 1/1. This is more common on photography lights like the Explore 600. The more powerful the light output is, the harder the light is going to be, but the brighter your image will be. Makes sense. More light is a brighter image. Now, what is the correct exposure for any given circumstance? Well, that's kind of hard to say in specific terms. Right now, I'm being lit by a 300-watt light that's at full power behind me, and the background is also being lit by a 300-watt light. But they're at different distances from the subject. It can be difficult to talk about the specific power setting required for your lighting setup in any given circumstance. Reason being is there's a number of factors at play in each shoot. Are you trying to correctly light the subject and you don't care about spill on the background? Okay, that's going to require one setting. How much room do you have? Do you need to bring your light closer because you're working in a smaller space? That's going to require a different setting. It's difficult to talk specific light settings because every situation is different. What we can do is talk about general terms. Here, the background without the light on it is underexposed in relation to me, the subject. And then we add in a second light on the background to bring some color and some vibrance into the background. So what we've done is we've underexposed the background by 2 stops, we've correctly exposed me, and then we've added in a spotlight on the background to make it a little bit more interesting. So here we have the main light on. And now we've added the background light. One thing you might want to consider when setting the power output of your light is how close it is to the subject. And we talked about this a little bit in hard light versus soft light, the previous episode. The closer you can bring your light to the subject, the softer the light is, and the less power you actually need from your light. Now, bringing the light super close, so it's just outside of the frame, might mean that you can actually dial back your power on your light by as much as 2 or even 3 stops. This, if you're using a battery-powered light, say you're using the apertures on battery power or you're using an Explore 600, means that you actually get more flashes out of your light. You have a quicker recharge time, which we talked about in episode 1, and it's generally a more pleasant experience. The light isn't as bright in your subject's face, so they're not squinting as much. There's one camera setting we didn't talk about, and that is your ISO. ISO, as you probably know, is the camera's sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO number, the brighter the overall image. Now, most cameras will have what's known as a native ISO, where the sensor performs best. A lot of photographers will want to use the lowest possible ISO so that they have the least amount of noise. But I challenge you to actually look at going a stop above where you think you want to be. If you're used to shooting at ISO 200, take an image at ISO 400. There's one last thing I want to talk about in this episode. I know it's probably a little bit longer than the other episodes, and it's a little bit more technical than most of them so far, so I'm going to try and keep this last segment short for you guys. Last thing I want to talk about in this episode is this. It's a light meter. Light meters are wonderful devices. They take the guesswork out of your camera and lighting settings. What you do is you tell the light meter where you want your shutter speed to be, where you want your ISO to be, and it measures the light that is where your subject is and tells you what aperture you should be at to correctly expose your image. Now you can do two things at this point. You can either change your camera's aperture to match the reading, or you can change your light output so that the reading on here matches where you want your aperture to be. Okay pals, that's it for episode 4 of Lighting 101, all on settings. Hopefully you found something useful. Next week in episode 5, we're going to be talking about lighting setups. So don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe so you get the notification as soon as the episode is released. I've been John with the LensPal, and I'll see you next week.